Hi, and thanks for joining me. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. You're about to see me carry out my first engine service on the boat. All I will say is that things didn't quite go according to plan. Take a look, see what happened. I'm about to service my engine. This is the first time I would have done this. Last year I got an engineer to do it for me. The reason for that was I wanted to watch someone do it first and see if I could pick up any tips. Now, years ago I used to service car engines, all fairly straightforward, and the principles are not difficult. There were 3 filters to change, 1 oil filter and 2 fuel filters, and they tend to screw on, you know, it's not difficult, but it is still a bit daunting when you're doing it for the first time. I'm going to start with changing this diesel filter. What's interesting about this is that when I watched it done last year, I was told to beware the small O-ring. In this package there are 2 small O-rings, one of which I know I need to use, and there were 2 of these. One of them I fitted in here already, and this one seems to fit around the rim, but I don't remember 2 rings being used last year. So that's fitted nicely in there. Whether that's it and I don't need this one, I don't know yet. So I'll see what happens when I take it off. Before I take off the old filter, I'm just going to smear some oil around the new ring in this filter. This bar in the middle I find very useful when I'm moving around, but I think it might make sense just to move it out the way. I'm really not clear where that little O-ring goes at the moment, so just take this off here. I don't think I said that I have already turned the fuel line off. I'm not really sure so as I say, it's easy when you watch someone else do it. When you do it for yourself, here we go. A bit of a mess here. Just quickly clean that, put that in there. I can see the O-ring now. It's actually on here. It's a bit fiddly actually. Oh, that's good. I'm glad I found that. This bar back makes it easier for me to move around. Frustrated from Yelvertoft. It's taken me an age to get this little O-ring off. I've been picking at it. I was trying to use this little hook and hook it down, and I think I've realised that there is probably a knack to using it, because I was trying to hook it down straight like that, and I think I should have gone in at an angle. Anyway, it's off and I've got the new one to put on. So I'm going to do that now. Well, that's soon done. I didn't think that part would take long. So now I can get ready to screw the new filter in. I actually had the larger O-rings round the wrong way, so what I showed initially was incorrect. Some diesel on there. It didn't fit into the top of the filter. It was actually to go at the bottom of the filter, and the other one went at the top. I have corrected it, but I didn't actually show doing so. It's engaged.
I should say I have also changed the air filter. It was just a question of undoing the two clips on the air filter cover, taking out the old one and popping in the new one.
Be careful not to over tighten this one. Well, that's the first filter in place. The second one, fortunately, is a lot easier. You just unscrew it and screw on the next one. So I'll do that now. This is the next oil filter to go on. I'll just put some of these around the top of the ring. Finding it difficult to get a grip on the filter. It's just awkwardly placed to put your hands on it and turn it. So I'm going to use this new filter wrench that I've bought. If I can get it out of the packaging. Here we go. Hey. Getting that. Yes, making progress now. Got it. No mess with this one. There is some diesel in here, I can see it floating around. That's going on. This should just be hand tight. Just need to get my hands in the right position to do that. I think I need to move my location. It's going a little bit more. I think that's sufficient. I don't think I mentioned it's raining outside. It was spitting this morning, but now there's some proper rain coming down. It's not heavy, but it's continuous. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to tidy up a little bit because I need to switch the fuel line back on and pump some diesel into the engine so that I can start it, because I'm going to do the oil now and I need the oil to be warm before I pump it out. Well, it's 2 days later. You will have seen that I had a problem starting the engine. I just couldn't get it to fire up. I realised that the system needed to be bled. I did the best I could. I was able to bleed the primary diesel filter. There was no bleed screw on the secondary filter. I looked around, couldn't really see any other bleed screws anywhere, and wasn't really expecting to find any because it is an electric pump and the pump should pump the fuel through the system in a loop and expel any air that is in it. But I was a little downhearted when I couldn't run the engine. The next stage of the service was to deal with the engine oil and filter and the gearbox oil, and I wanted to warm the oil up, but obviously if I couldn't start the engine that wasn't going to happen. So I finished that day and I did a lot of research online, looking at YouTube videos, looking at manuals. Couldn't actually find the answers that I wanted that covered my engine. I had another look yesterday and didn't get anywhere with it. This morning I decided to ring River Canal Rescue, of which I'm a member. I have been for 2 years. I've never made a claim before, but I have Home Start included in my membership, so thought, well, I'll give them a ring and see if they can help. I rang just after 10 o'clock. They said they'd ring me back in a few minutes, which they did, and I was told that an engineer would be with me by 11:30. and shortly after then, lo and behold, an engineer turned up. So I was very, very pleased to see him. The first thing he actually did was to look at the alternator belts, and the one driving the starter alternator was in very poor condition. So he said, well, we're going to have to replace that one. Unfortunately, he didn't have a spare belt with him. He has put on a temporary belt, which is a little narrower than what the standard belt is, but he said it would do until I can get a replacement. He also examined the other alternator belt for the leisure batteries. There is a little bit of wear in that, certainly not as severe as the other one, and I will replace that as well. It looks as though the alternator has been changed at some time, because it's a sort of tight fit. He had to do a lot of fiddling around. In fact, he had to sort of take off the larger alternator in order to do what he needed to do with the smaller one. But he got that all sorted out. I had always had a suspicion that the problem was to do with the fuel pump. Some boats have a mechanical fuel pump, but my boat has an electric fuel pump. And I had expected, when I switched the ignition on, to hear it pumping, and I hadn't heard anything. So I did wonder if it was to do with that. I'm sure last year when I had the engineer service the engine, that when he switched the ignition on I heard it pumping, but I didn't. Anyway, the engineer that visited found that it was the pump that had failed. It was pumping, but very, very weak. And fortunately he did have a replacement pump with him, so he was able to fit that. He turned the ignition on and the engine fired into life. And what a lovely sound to hear it. So I'm now in the position that I can run the engine, warm the oil and carry on with the service. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to start the engine now. To be honest, I'm not really sure how long to run the engine for to warm it up. Having run it, I'm giving it a little while to cool down. Does that make sense? I'm going to start with the gearbox because I think the gearbox should be cleaner, because I haven't got to remove a filter or anything like that. I have to use a suction pump to take the oil out of the gearbox, and I have bought one especially for the purpose, which I'll be using. I did test it the other day using some water. First of all, I couldn't get it to go, and then I realised what I was doing wrong. Well, not wrong. I had the pipe that I was putting into the hole in here wasn't sealing it properly, but with a larger connection it pumped straight away. So I'm hoping that the contents of there will fit in here. It is designed to do that, so that's where I'm going to start. What I need to do is to remove this, what looks like a bolt here. It is actually the dipstick, and I'll do that now. Yep, I've got that nice and loose. Very fine line at the bottom here as to where it should be filled up to. There's no flex at all in this hose. I'm going to attach a thinner hose at this end here to put into the gearbox. So this end is going to go into here. Push that in hard. Because this is so coily, as it were, you know, very rigid, I'm going to insert a smaller tube there and run it into the gearbox. Now, last year the engineer actually he had a very thin copper pipe, and I thought that was a very good way of going about it, and my idea was to do the same, but I've not obviously been able to source a copper pipe, so I'm going to have to use some flexible pipe. This is actually too long, but I'm going to cut it once I know roughly how much I need. There we go. It's going in there now. I need to rest that somewhere. And it's awkward, isn't it? Dear, dear, dear. I can see why a proper tube would be better. Can't actually see what I'm doing. I think it's going to be difficult to get all the oil out. It's difficult to know whether I'm touching the bottom of the gearbox. Well, I'm ready to pump, so I'm going to give it a go. Here we go. I can feel the pressure building up. It's not coming out though. I shortened the coil of pipe, cut it off, because I wasn't getting anywhere. And now, I don't know if you can see, but it is coming through. I don't know how long I have to keep pumping for. Yes, it is coming in the bottom here. Oops. Best not to talk while I'm doing this, I think. Can't get it to siphon again. There's no doubt having a long tube that you can put down into the gearbox and suck up from would be a great help, because then you know that you're in the oil. With my coily flexible tube, I don't know that I'm in the oil. But it did start to work, but I've only got very small amount out. Very small indeed. I'm just going to leave that for a minute and concentrate on the engine oil, I think.
As the engine is marinized and the oil can't be drained from the sump as usual, a pump has been fitted to the side of the engine for that purpose.
Yes, that's coming out nicely. The engine takes 5.5 litres, and there's 5 litres in the tub when you buy it. I'm not sure how much of the engine oil you actually get out. I think I've got out as much oil as is going to come out. You can hear when I pump now. There's nothing there to come anymore. So I'll bring the bottle out and remove the filter. Right. Good, that part of the operation has gone fairly well.
I'm just putting the stopper back to make sure it doesn't get lost. Best to do it whilst I think of it. I can't see any oil showing on the dipstick. I'm just going to use the filter wrench again to remove the oil filter.
Let's turn it. I'm finding it very difficult to get a rag or anything under the filter, because it is so close to the steel that the engine is mounted on. Just smearing some oil around the seal. I thought some oil was going to spew out when I took off the filter, but it didn't, so that's good. Well, I'm ready now to refill the engine with oil. I did say it should take 5.5 litres. We haven't taken out even 5 litres, probably 4 litres. So I'm going to be very careful with putting the oil back. I don't want to have to pump it out again. So I'll put some in and keep testing until I get it right. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there's a hatched section from here to there, so minimum and high. But when I slide it out, you get a smear of oil coming along here as well, so it's making it very difficult to see That's 3 litres I've put in so far. I'll just put a little bit more in. I'm now going to check the dipstick just to see where we're at. I've just stepped inside the cabin because this camera isn't coping too well with the bright sunshine. I've taken out somewhere between, I'm just looking at the bottle, about 3.5 litres, and I've put back just over 3 litres, I would say, so far. Well, I can tell that because there's a measure on the side of the bottle. But I'm having trouble to see exactly where I am on the dipstick because the oil is smearing along the length of the dipstick. So instead of seeing it fully across where it should be, if you understand, and then a smear, it's sort of smearing all the way from the bottom up. So it's making it very difficult for me to know exactly where I am. I'm just going to give it a little bit of time to settle down, and I'll test it again. Well, I've just checked the dipstick again. It's very, very difficult. It's not defined easily as to where the oil is. Obviously it needs time to settle down, run through the engine and everything. I think I've got sufficient oil in it to be safe. So I'm going to leave that for now, and I'll run the engine, and I think I'll probably check it when it's cold, and tomorrow or something like that. I'm just measuring out the oil that I've taken out from the gearbox, so I can put at least the same amount back and possibly a little bit more. I can't think of any other way of working out exactly how much to put in. So I've taken very little out from the gearbox. I don't think on this trip to the gearbox to service it that I'm going to be able to get any more out. I need to better sort myself with a pipe or something attached to the siphon so that the pipe can go right to the bottom of the gearbox, and then I can pump it out. Using a flexible hose just doesn't work. So this is the plan at the moment. What I've actually done is I've put a very small funnel down there, and then I will fill in from another funnel. So I'll pour from here, I'll clean this out and then I'll put the clean oil into a larger funnel that will pour into the smaller funnel that will go into the gearbox. Because what you need is a funnel with a very, very long neck before you get to the funnel part, and I just don't have anything like that. It's strange, all the thought I've given to doing the service and pumping out the gearbox oil and that sort of thing, I've not given one thought as to how I'm going to get the oil back in, and it is tricky with everything that's in the way. It's not just the air filter, there are other things down there as well. I'm now pouring some new oil into the gearbox using my double funnel arrangement. So I've just poured the oil into the gearbox. I've now got the dipstick. I'm going to see what level it's at. There's a very tiny mark at the end of the dipstick. Just untightening it again. I've just tested it. The oil is just beneath, very marginally, the mark on the dipstick. So I'm just going to put a drop more in and call it a day on that aspect. That's better, it's slightly above the mark now. May have attached too much. Well, that's the finish of the engine service as far as I can go today anyway. So the filters have been done. We've had a new fuel pump. I've changed the oil filter now. Changed the oil in the engine. Not had a great deal of success with the gearbox, but I did manage to get a little bit out, and I put some back. So I'm pleased as far as that goes. I need to sort out a better method for suctioning out, or siphoning out I should say, the oil. So there you have it for the moment. I've got a lot of tidying up to do and I've got a few phone calls to make, so I'll leave it there and I'll catch up with you later.
I'll say bye for the moment.
So that was a little disappointing for me, in that I couldn't complete the engine service in one day. I was really downhearted when I couldn't get the engine to run again. I don't think, well, I really sunk low, I have to say. I lost my usual spirit that I have, but it came back a couple of days later. I have revisited the gearbox and tried again. I managed to source some copper pipe from a chandler's, and I straightened it out, and I tried to put it down through the gearbox, but it's obviously hitting the gears. It needs to go in at a slight angle, or maybe I need to turn the gearbox over, whether that will move the gears in such a way that I can get access. But basically I had the same result as when I first tried. I got exactly the same amount of oil out. So at least there's been some more oil taken out and some more put back, so some fresh oil has gone into it. I've ordered 2 new alternator belts, as both need changing. There is one for the alternator that deals with the engine starter battery, and the other alternator deals with the leisure batteries. The engineer that came from River Canal Rescue did advise that both will need changing. He did put a temporary one on to the engine alternator, but it's too narrow and should be replaced. He did say it would be okay to cruise with it, but I've not been out since. It won't actually stop me going out, but I've been busy with other things. So once those 2 have come in, I have actually already found one belt, but as I need 2, I'm waiting for the next 2 to come in. I'll then have 3, so when I fit 2, I'll have a spare. That's the plan. So hopefully that won't be long now. They were ordered over a week ago. I shopped around, but I couldn't find many sources to get these particular belts. So I'm just being patient. But hopefully they'll come in shortly. I'll get the belt sorted out and I'll be ready to cruise. So meanwhile, it just remains for me to say many thanks for watching, as always. Keep yourselves safe and well. Take care, and bye for now.